So let me just go over that again real quick because of the recording. But basically, if Firewall, its job is to analyze traffic going across your network, and it decides whether or not it allows the traffic to go through. And so how it decides to do what it does is how good the firewall is. So the stateful firewalls that we're about to go over, they only go through the ports. So at layer 4, and so you can filter traffic on what port and what IP address, but that's as far as it will go. That is very handy, but nowadays the next generation firewall is the way to go for sure, because that does things at the application level. So I could filter out things such as Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, that type of thing. So let me pull up a graphic for you. Am I sharing my screen? No, not yet. Okay, hang on. I'll find the picture I'm looking for in just a second here. Okay, yeah, this will work. This one. Share. Okay. So just to give you an idea of what we've got here in at the St. Martin's University, I've divided all of our VLANs up into different categories. And so that all goes through our core switch and router, and then through a firewall to the internet. And then so the internet is allowed to get to certain servers and services, but it's got to go through the firewall in order to get to that. And then everybody here has to get through the firewall to get out as well. So for each type of traffic that we've got, we have a rule that matches it, and it decides whether or not it allows it or denies it. So so this is kind of how the mapping of where the firewall normally goes. This is the traditional place that you would put a firewall. Notice we have two individual ones. That's a redundancy. So they are connected to a redundant router setup, so that it's if any one device were to go out, we still have connectivity between them all. So the new way to do things, or at least the Palo Alto way to do things, is what they call a zero trust network. So basically what they would want me to do is they would want me to set up firewalls at every location in the network. And that way it would analyze traffic more closely to where it originates at. That way I can have more control over what it goes through. However, cost considerations are a big thing. So Palo Altos are very expensive. So the university is not able to afford to have something like that. In the future, I may actually put in the open source firewalls closer to like over at the dorms and that type of thing, just so I could have a little more security involved. But for right now, this is the way we've got things set up. So, and then at the core switch level, we have ACLs running on the core switch and router that do more stateful type firewalling. So, for example, students aren't able to access the staff or faculty VLANs, but they can get to the servers or certain servers. You can't get to all of them, but certain ones, the ones they need to get to. Staff and faculty can't get to students, but they can get to the servers they need to get to. So we can put firewall type, what they call ACLs, access control lists, on a router and get some functionality for some security, but not to where the Palo Altos were good. So I'll show you that in a minute here. So close that out and go to this. What you see here is the dashboard of OPNSense. This is an open source firewall. It runs in a VM on a server that we have here for the Cybersecurity Club. And so right now it's not really hooked to anything other than it's got an inside network and an outside network. You can see here is the LAN and the WAN, they call it. I'm coming in from the WAN at the moment. That's the way I'm managing it. So right now it's not really firewalling anything other than just to show you guys what it looks like. The other one that we've got running is a Palo Alto firewall, and that is firewalling things on the cybersecurity club server. So, so like I said, this is a virtual machine, and I've got it hooked up to two different networks on the server. These are all virtual devices that we're about to see. Everything is all just, it's not real at all. So we have instances of Ubuntu, instances of Windows 10, instances of Windows Server, all running on this one cybersecurity server, or cybersecurity club server. Basically just an isolated environment, and so we can use it to test various methods and procedures of hacking, and to try to see if we can break into things that we're not supposed to get into. So we can do what the industry term is called research, and basically it's trying to hack each other. So anyways, this is the dashboard. Over here we have all of the different things that you can do with this firewall, and there's actually quite a few features that this firewall comes with out of the box. You don't have to do anything at all with it. So it's like this to begin with. So you get different reporting features on traffic flows and health of the actual server, the system. You can assign different groups and users. You can have high availability, so you could have more than one server or more than one firewall connected to each other, like we had in that picture I just showed you. And then you can put in different certificates, authorities. There's a handy wizard that lets you connect to it and set it up quickly. Interfaces, you can add more, but you have the LAN interfaces and the WAN interface, and there's different settings for each. I don't really have much configured on these, just the basics. You can assign the physical interface to the LAN and the WAN. Get an overview of what we have here. Basically an in and an out, or an outside and an inside. Depends on how you want to look at it. The virtual IPs, we don't have anything set up on that. You can hook up a wireless access point to it, or put this on a wireless access point, like replace the firmware with this firewall software, and you can actually make it a Wi-Fi point too. You can also connect to point-to-point connections such as VPN, and then other types as well. Under the firewall, you can set up groups, Natting, which is network address translation. We haven't really talked about that much, but we will. I think basically you're got an inside private network, and you're going to NAT it out to a public network. You can do that here. Under the rules, you can assign rules to the LAN or the WAN, and also a loopback rule, so or a floating rule. I'm not sure what the difference between a floating and a loopback is, but you can probably read the documentation for it. But under the LAN here, these are rules that are come out of the box set up when you run the wizard. It sets these up for you. Icmp is ping, so it allows you to ping any source, any port, any destination on a schedule, even if you wanted to, in and out, basically. Same thing with IP version 4. Everything is allowed. Basically, default allow LAN any rules, what they call it. Same thing with the WAN. Now, by default, it doesn't come with this rule. I had to put this in order to manage it from the outside, but basically, it's not doing anything as far as filtering goes. It's letting everything in, any source, any port, any destination. That's what these stars mean, is anything. So apparently it's got a packet shaper built in as well, which is kind of cool. That packet shaper it analyzes how much traffic, and then will prioritize certain traffic over others. You can assign, say, hey, this group only gets so many megabits of speed to play with, that type of thing. So again, it also has VPN available, different services you can do, captive portal, DHCP, DNS, network time protocol. It's really a pretty cool little firewall. I was impressed when I heard about it. So again, this is open source, and if you want to look into it further, you can. It is based on another open source firewall called PFSense. And PFSense has all this stuff built in as well, but it doesn't have all the cool features that this one does. Or I take that back. If you want all the cool features that this one has, you have to pay money for. So you go with the OPNSense one, which is a fork, and everything's for free. So anyway, so that's the OPNSense firewall. I just thought I'd show it to you in case you're looking for something open source. And in that case, let's look at the paid for firewall, the good one. So this is the Palo Alto firewall. Again, this is on a virtual environment. It's all running on a server in a virtual world. These are the management IP addresses of it. It's got, you can tell it's running on Vmware. It's called a VM50. This is just the dashboard, tells you that we have these interfaces available, and these 4 are actually connected and working at the moment. It's got system logs that show you everything, all the different updates that happen, CPU usage, whether or not you've got high availability, which we don't. This is only a single server. We don't have more than one. For testing purposes, there's no reason to have a high availability to where you have more than one connected to each other, so that you have a redundancy.
Yeah, just to clarify, we're not looking at the actual production firewall for St. Martin's here.
Correct. This is just a test server, something that we use for
firewall. It's not the physical appliance that they have running. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So and then yeah, the firewall will do URL filtering and threat evaluation built in out of the box. Just a matter of buying the license for it. And so yeah, URL filtering means that it can, if you as a client want to go to a restricted website, it will not let you. So, or it will allow you, depending on who you are. So you can set that all up inside the firewall. I'm going to start over on this side of the device. Basically, this is the more lower level side of things, and then it works its way to the higher level. So it's kind of backwards with how you read a book, but the tabs here kind of are the high level categories of things. So under device are all the different things that have to do with the actual firewall setup. Imagine you had a physical device that you just would install in a rack someplace, rather than a VM. But the device itself, this is all the different things you can do with it. So under setup, we have things like saving your configuration or loading an old configuration or a snapshot. Under the management, you've got different host names, what time zone, what the time is in the clock, what your authentication profile, certificates, that type of thing. Logging reporting settings. You can actually send everything that happens on this firewall, you can send it to a log server, and then the log server will collate that stuff. It does have its own logs that save things in it, and we'll look at that in a minute. But it only has so much space available. So once the space fills up, then it kind of overwrites the old stuff. So if you want to keep stuff longer, you have to send it to a log server. Banners and messages. Let's see here. Let's go to interfaces. So the interface management, I can allow ping, HTTPS, SSH, just for the management address. I could also allow other services available, such as HTTP, Telnet, SNMP, user IDs. There's all kinds of things you can do with this. It's just amazingly dense with all the different options that are available. So, you know, when I got certified as a Palo Alto instructor, it took both Mark and I, Mark went through the same series, I guess you should say. It was a week-long, 8 hours a day class that we had to do. So there's a ton to this firewall. And I don't know if I can get to it all within the next hour. So I'll go on as much as I can. I may hit the high points here for you. It's got everything from user identification, such as you can connect it to an Ldp server and map the name to an IP address. It's just a matter of setting it up here in the firewall. So when it shows up in the log, it not only shows the IP address of the user that it matched the rule to, but also the username of the person. So I could set that to work with both Active Directory as well as our NAC system that we have here on campus. So basically it will map the username to IP address, so that it's much easier to see, hey, instead of 10.200.0.6 wanted to go to this website and couldn't, it's Sally Martin went to this website and couldn't, and you know, it's much easier to track down. So under certificates, there's all kinds of cool certificate things you can do with it. It will accept every kind of certificate you can think of. You know, and I don't know if we've talked about certificates much in this class, but basically they are methods of authenticating you. I can't say that word, but it's a way of saying, hey, this is authorized. This communication that I'm sending you is authorized. And it's been authorized by this third party who gave me this certificate, is basically how that works. So we can use that to authenticate emails as well as just regular traffic. If we want to decrypt traffic, we use a certificate, a self-signed certificate that you have to accept. So we don't use that on campus just because I would have to install this certificate, our self-signed certificate, on every device on campus, including your phones and tablets, computers, and we're talking 6,000 devices here on campus that we keep track of. So it'd be too much work. And then on top of that, kind of an invasion of privacy too. So there's a lot of iffiness with the decryption of things. So we don't do that on campus, but there could be an area like if you were working at a highly secure environment where they might require you to have decryption enabled. They install the certificate on their computer and you only allowed to use their computer to do things at your work. And they will probably decrypt everything that's there. So, all right, so that's enough of the device. Let's go to network. Here is where we're talking about all the different interfaces on this firewall. As you can see here, I called them blue team, red team, the DMZ, and internet. You can call them whatever you want, because if you notice, everything is in capitalized. If you remember right, whenever I capitalize something, it just shows up really, really big and bold. So I know that I put this in. This isn't something that came with the firewall, such as IP address. Well, actually, but it looks big and bold. Like this layer 3, I didn't put that in there. That was the type of interface. That was a drop down that I had. I couldn't type that in, but the name of things I could. So so anytime you see something in big uppercase, that's something that I typed in. And then this everything's set up like a spreadsheet, so you can move things around and just make it look the way you want it to look. But we have the links, they're all green, which means they're up. Hang on, let me go back to interfaces. You can do different VLANs and loopbacks and tunnels, SD-WAN. All this is available on these firewalls, but we're not going to go into those too much, just because I'd run out of time if I had to if I talked about every little thing that happened on this firewall. So let's move on to zones. As you can see, I have a zone set up for every interface on the firewall here. So I've got 4 interfaces and I've got 4 zones. And that's so that the interface is basically a router interface for a network. So in this case, we have the blue team. Those are like client computers. We have the DMZ, which are their servers that they've got to defend. And we have the red team, which is our bad guys that are going to try to attack the blue team. And then internet is how we can get updates and get out to the internet and do research, that type of thing. So that's the reason why I have different zones, is because with Palo Alto, in order to filter traffic, you have to do zone to zone. So it doesn't go interface to interface. So you have to associate an interface with the zone in order for it to filter traffic between them. So and then we have them all associated with a router called CyberSaints router. And as you can see, all these interfaces all go to this one router. And you can do like we've been doing before with our packet tracer. You got RIP, OSPF, BGP. Notice how it doesn't have EIGRP available, but that's because it's a Cisco proprietary protocol, and this is a Palo Alto industry standard router. So that's why there's no EIGRP. But you've got BGP, you got OSPF, RIP, all that stuff. I think I've just got this statically routed, so just a default route, which is just a manually put in route. There's only one, so that was pretty easy to do. And that's just saying, hey, everything that's attached to this firewall, we're going to send it. If I don't know anything about it, so in other words, I know all about the attached interfaces. If I don't know anything about something else that comes through, I'm going to send it out to the internet. That's basically all that means. So you can do IPsec tunnels, which is VPN tunnels, static VPNs they call them. You can also do Global Protect tunnels, which is Palo Alto's VPN client that they've come out with, and you install that on your phone or your computer, tablet, whatever. They've got a client for it all, and it will establish a secure connection through this firewall, assuming you've got it set up. But it allows you to get into a private network from the outside world without in an encrypted way, a safe way to do it. So that's Global Protect. QoS, if you remember me talking to Jonathan about QoS, this is how you can prioritize certain type of traffic over others. Lldp is a method of basically allowing a device to identify another device at layer 2. So you can do switch to switch. It's kind of like a routing protocol except for switches, basically, is a good way to think about it. I don't have it set up on here just because there's no other devices. It's just a, like I said, a virtual world. Under network profiles, there's different encryptions and different zone protection profile, such as you can protect against what they call a denial of service attack. And there's all kinds of different types of denial of service attack, but they pretty much protect against all of them, as well as port scanning and host sweeping, which are all techniques that the red team can use to either disable you or get information about your network that you might not know that they're getting. So they're discovering things that are on the network that aren't publicly available. So this will protect against all of that type of activity. So anyway, so that's pretty much the network side of things. Let's head into objects. Objects is where you can assign IP addresses to names. You assign them. And just as an example, I've just created what I call a bad guy, and I assigned it an address of 2.2.2.2. That's not a real address at all. It might be an internet routable address. Somebody might have that, but I don't know who it is. I just made it up. Just as an example of the last time I made this talk. I've done this, the Palo Alto talk a few times. Excuse me, my mouth is getting dry here. And there's just so much to go through. So anyways, so I have put an address to everything. And if you notice, it's a /24. So it's a group of addresses. It's not just a single. And that's the blue team. And that's the DMZ servers that they've got. Internet. Kali Linux. I wanted to identify our Kali Linux machine, which is our red team guy. And that's his IP. My own computer at work. And then the red team addresses. Excuse me. And if you notice, the red team addresses are part of the same network as the Kali Linux guy. So I've identified it with the red team and assigned it to a zone in the red team. Now, address groups are just a matter of grouping addresses. So once you've defined the address in here, you can group it together. In this case, I've just grouped together the bad guy and the Kali Linux together into one group. Just as an example, there's really no reason why you'd want to do this in this particular case, because the bad guy is actually not part of the red team. But just for an example, to show you that you can take addresses from any place and group them together. And so yeah. Anyway, so regions, you can set up different regions of the country and the world so that when the traffic logs come through, it shows the proper latitude and longitude numbers and that type of thing, location numbers. So this thing's really cool. You can tell where traffic is from other countries. You know, if you want to filter on, say, hey, I don't want any traffic coming from Russia, I can do that. If I don't like any traffic from Vietnam, yeah, I can put that in there. Or, hey, I really like traffic from Ireland. Yeah, sure, we can do that. You know, it's really, it's up to you. Applications, again, this is what I was talking about before. This is the layer 7 part of it. They will match your traffic based on different applications. And there are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of applications that it knows about. And it gets updates all the time of new ones. So just for example, if I wanted to filter on Facebook, there's all kinds of different Facebook things. Facebook Mail, Facebook Code, Facebook Downloading, file sharing. Associated with that is things like Tinder or Trippy, games. You know, it's all associated with this Facebook. And then it gives you a risk factor of 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. And is a Facebook app, apparently it's a 4 of a risk factor for being secure. And then these are purely just something that Palo Alto has come up with. So just in general, Facebook apps aren't very secure, so they've got them a number 4. You may like Facebook apps, or maybe your company makes the Facebook app, so maybe you want to allow this traffic, even though it's a 4. It's a decision that you have to make, but it tells you what kind of risk factor your traffic is going to have. So, and then of course you can group all these applications into one group in here so that it's easier to match a policy with. Services are the old school stateful services, destination port protocols, that type of thing. So you can go, if you've got something that doesn't match an application, like an old application that isn't in the list, or a proprietary application that isn't in the list, you can go through and do the old-fashioned port matching instead. So you've got the security part of this available if you want to at layer 4. And then tags are different things that you can tag your traffic with, different colors, basically. So, anywho, security profiles. So here's where we set up the antivirus, anti-spyware, vulnerability protection, URL filtering, file blocking, wildfire analysis, data filtering, and denial of service protection. All in one shot. You can make it into a group here of all the different things that you want to check for, and it will check each and every piece of data that comes through, every packet that runs through the firewall. It will check all of that all at once and in real time. It's just amazing. So just to go into some more detail though, antivirus, you can set it to how much or how sensitive you want this to be set, and you can add different things to it. Right now it's set for HTTP, SMTP, IMAP, POP, FTP, and SMB, and just all the defaults alerts. But you can customize this however you want. Palo Alto doesn't really recommend you do that, but you can if you like, if you know what you're doing. Same thing with the anti-spyware. It's got, either default or strict. Because spyware, yeah, definitely don't want viruses, but spyware, you know, sometimes you may need an app and it's classified as spyware, but you may need it, so you may have to allow it. So that's why they gave you a strict or default, which isn't quite as strict. So you got medium and low, you know, that type of thing. So anyways, vulnerability protection. This protects against things like brute force attacks and other, it's basically a group of vulnerabilities, you know, against your own system. So it identifies traffic that is directed against you that is identified as being a vulnerability. So it basically goes through and says, hey, this is suspicious looking, I'm going to drop it. Sorry. And then I'll make a note of that in the log that, hey, I dropped this traffic because it was bad. This is where the URL filtering is. There are 58 different categories of URLs that it looks at, that it can look at, I should say. Come on. Oh, well, I'll just run through the list here. Drugs, abortion, adult, tobacco, auctions, business, command and control. Basically, Palo Alto has gone through and gone through the entire internet and categorized it. And so when you go to a website, it will categorize it as one of these different categories, and it might be allowed or blocked, or just alerted. So, and when alert happens, you can set it to where the user pops up a page and says, hey, this is a suspicious site, you sure you want to go here? And then you click yes to continue, or no, I don't want to. So you can have it either completely block it, or you can have it just as a, hey, this is kind of risky, I don't know if you should do this, you know, that type of thing. So, and there's all kinds of different things: extremism, financial services, gambling, games, government. I mean, good stuff, bad stuff. It doesn't make any judgments. You have to make the judgment as far as what's good and what's bad. It just categorizes it for you. So, and you can see that there's like phishing sites and private IP addresses you could filter out if you wanted to. There's just a wide variety of different URLs that you may or may not want to allow on your network. So that's, you know, more of a question for you and your, you know, if you're the network guy, that's a question for your manager. Say, hey, I can filter out these URLs. Just tell me which ones you want me to access, allow, and which ones you want me to block, and we can do it. And then in addition to that, it allows you to do this for certain types of traffic. So for example, here at the university, staff people have more restrictions than students do going out to the internet. So that's because we view students as more of an ISP. We don't really, yes, we want to keep you from going to malicious sites and phishing and that type of thing, stuff that may harm you, but we don't filter things like porn or nudity or things like that. Whereas here on staff, those do get filtered out. So again, it's more restrictive for the staff than it is student. And you can set that to be individuals if you want, or you can set that for groups of people or groups of devices. It's very, very versatile. File blocking. So you can block certain types of files going across the firewall from either the outside or the inside. You know, executable files, 7-zip files, batch files, all kinds of different things, and you can customize it to whatever you want it to be. Wildfire is a really cool feature that the firewall has to it. Wildfire is Palo Alto's solution for zero-day attacks. Now, I don't know if you guys know what a zero-day attack is. Anybody want to tell me what that is? Pretty sure Gary knows. But
Are there vulnerabilities that like haven't been detected yet?
right. Yep, exactly right. So what Wildfire does is everything that runs through, if it doesn't recognize in the threat protection, the vulnerability protection, if it doesn't recognize it, it will send it to a Wildfire server out on the internet where it is then exploded, basically. It goes to the link, it clicks the link for you, basically, or it opens up the attachment for you, and it will it will then figure out, is this bad or is this good? And it's a sandboxed environment up there. And then and then it will return that to you as far as what it decided. And then on top of that, if it finds something bad, it then spreads that out to every other Palo Alto firewall in their organization. So every one of them that they've ever sold, it goes out to around the world. So it's basically a way of defeating zero-day attacks. Yeah, it's really cool. I'm impressed with it. And then I've seen a few things come through our firewall that have gone through for analysis, but nothing has come back as malicious. It's just stuff that looks like, that's weird. I'm going to send that to Wildfire. So, but yeah, it's really cool. Data filtering. You can do different, it's like a custom application thing. If you want to do something custom, you can match your own pattern and filter it out, basically. DOS protection is denial of service protection. In other words, like somebody sends a flood of SYN packets or UDP packets against your well, in this case, firewall, it won't affect the performance. You'll still be able to use things like normal. It won't completely saturate the interface. So if you have this turned on, so it's handy. Anyway, so this is where, okay, so the groups is you can take all of these and to make them one big giant group, or separate them out into several groups if you want. And it will do all of this all at once for every packet that runs through the firewall. Log forwarding is, it will make a log entry for every packet that runs through, or every session, excuse me, runs through the firewall. And we'll get to that in a minute, what the session means. But this is where you would set up the log forwarding. It does keep logs itself, but the space is limited. So you send log forwarding out to a syslog server, and it will keep the logs for you, and you can collate them later. And you can have a much bigger availability for that data. You can keep it longer. Authentication. This is for different web pages that's got built in for, say, Global Protect. You can download the client, but you have to log into the web browser first. So that's what that is. Decryption. This is a decryption profile. You can decrypt various traffic, like anything that is encrypted, it can be decrypted. If you force as the administrator, if you force your users to accept your certificate, you become basically a man-in-the-middle attack, but it's legal. So yeah, that's how that works. And if you don't know what a man-in-the-middle attack is, basically you've got encrypted communication between you and another party out on the internet. Well, I get in the middle and I decrypt it, is basically how that works. So you have to go through me in order to get to that person. So in the middle there, I will, you give me, I make you use my certificate, which then allows me to decrypt your traffic, which then gets encrypted back again to the responsible party. So that's how that works. It's how decryption works here. So anyways, that's it pretty much for the objects. Let's go to the policies. So this, of course, because it's kind of a do-it-all firewall. It's got NAT policies, QoS policies, decryption policies, tunnel inspection, all these different things. DOS protection, SD-WAN policies. The big one though is security. That's the one what everybody basically uses. This is where I mainly hang out. Once you've set up your NAT policies and your QoS and all that, once that's done, you don't really mess with it much. Security, on the other hand, that comes and goes because it depends on the needs of things. So, this is what changes the most. And the way it works is that each of these lines here is a rule, and they get evaluated one at a time, and they go from the top to the bottom. So at the bottom, you have the any's, and at the top, you have more specific. You know, I've got the red team being blocked from the blue team. And if you go over, you see that it's any application, any service, the action is deny. And we haven't used it much, so this hit it's not been hit very much. So this particular rule, though, the all access rule, this allows everybody to go to the internet. And that one has been hit quite a bit because we have systems that are running behind this firewall that are going out to the internet and getting time updates and things like that. We'll see that in a minute when we get to the monitor tab. So before I go further, do we have any questions so far? Because I've just been kind of talking a lot. No? All right.
Hey, one question, Peter.
Yeah.
Going back to what you were talking about with the connection to the router, and shows the 4 ports.
Back in the network side.
Yeah, you go into the interfaces, and you've got 4 interfaces here that are active. So Ethernet 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4. In a scenario like this, how do you tie those to the router then virtually? How does that work?
Okay, so the way I do this is you have to set up the zones and the router itself, what it's associated with, and the IP address. In this case, I named the IP address red team, which was an actual range of IPs. And so this then gets tied into the router, a virtual router that they have built into the Palo Alto. So it becomes its own little router here, and it will route between each one of these interfaces itself.
So it's the firewall, it's the router, it's everything.
It's everything, all one.
So as a virtual router and virtual firewall, in this case, it's all self-contained, but right. Ultimately there you have to actually connect to this.
Right.
How do you physically connect to this?
Okay, so the way
not just not just promoting in, but I mean
that's done through the ESXi server. In their network settings in here.
Okay, yeah. So you get in here, and then when you've got
and so I've set the different teams up to a different VLAN. So they have a different VLAN ID. And so the VMs in here, they will associate with this VLAN, which then gets tied into the, these all represent an interface on the firewall. So yeah, that's basically it. Does that make sense?
So you set up those interfaces.
So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 interfaces here.
So you set up
the firewall, I've got
these
1, 2, 3,
interfaces.
4.
Then you physically tied those interfaces to interfaces that are then provided by the VMM, by the hypervisor.
Right.
Tie those to an already created VLAN.
So these 4, yep, are all VLANs, and they're associated then with the interfaces here, these 4, with these IP addresses. So basically the Palo Alto thinks that it has a physical interface, Ethernet 1, 2, and 3, and 4, but in reality, it's done by the hypervisor. The hypervisor has created these interfaces on and then associated them with a different VLAN on each. So they talk on a different network, basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now, when you tie another, let's say you just had a Windows server, like that Windows Server 2012 R2 or something. And you want to put that on one of those VLANs. You put it on one of the VLANs in here, and that ties it to the switch.
Right.
And then the switch, the only way the switch is connected to other VLANs is to actually have traffic go through the firewall, which then goes to its own built-in router, which does the routing to go back to another VLAN.
Correct.
Because this is not routing at the hypervisor level here.
Right. So when you set up, this is the settings for this virtual server that we've set. We've got 4 CPUs, a memory, hard disk, and down here at network, you've got a network adapter that you defined. And here I've called it Blue Team DNZ. And this is where the VLAN that you're trying to connect to. This is the network VLAN you're trying to connect to. So that's where you got it, where you set it at. So I could make this a red team if I want to, just by clicking that. Or if I wanted to make it a client computer, I could make it that. Or if I wanted to make it into a firewall, I could click VM network, and it'd be the outside.
So so for people on here, if you were confused, because this virtual environment's confusing a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
You're not plugging in physical wires. You basically configured these as VLANs, and if you had 4 boxes and you each assigned them to a different VLAN, none of them would talk to each other. They would just sit there going nowhere, because they would go to a VLAN and nothing else is connected to the VLAN. But then when you tie in this other firewall, which is itself a VM, but now you've tied that to all 4 VLANs, and it has built-in routing, all of a sudden they're all talking to each other, because now you've defined the gateway in the firewall, and there's a way for them to get out of their subnet or their VLAN and talk to the other servers within this virtual environment. So anyways, it's confusing.
It's a little confusing,
so I didn't know
but it works.
Totally straightforward for everybody else here.
All right, so yeah, that's pretty much it. So let me. So this is VMware. If you haven't messed with VMware, it's very cool. You can get a discounted license as a student or something like that. I don't know, but you can run it on your own. Oh, it's for free. Okay. Yeah. So you can install this on your own server at home and make your own environment if you want, and you can do all kinds of crazy stuff with it. Of course, as soon as you start buying servers, they get expensive real quick, as Gary Joy knows. So.
Yeah, but one thing you gotta be careful of is when you install VMware for the Hyper-V, or what your motherboard support with, you can go back and forth with the virtual box. So you gotta choose whether you want to go for virtual box or VMware for your virtual machine software.
Right.
You
Yeah.
can do both.
Yep. I don't know if VirtualBox will do all the different network switch
Nope.
functions, though.
Nope, that's why it's free, you know.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah,
So,
that's why it's free.
yeah, Hyper-V though, which comes with Windows Server, that will do it. So if you purchase a Windows Server license, you can install that on your server and run Hyper-V on it instead of VMware. So that's an option as well.
Oh, what I meant was for the Hyper-V was there every BIOS or depends on motherboard it support virtualization that you might need to go into BIOS setting and enable the virtualization that thing,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
but that virtualization it only support one software at a time.
Right.
So yeah, if you do VMware and you're trying to switch it over to VirtualBox, then you would have to turn that off, delete whatever thing that you have right now, and then install one that you're trying to use, and then turn that back on. Otherwise, it'll not gonna go switch left and right.
Yep. Yep. All right. So anyways, going back to where we were before. So this we were talking about policies. You can define your own policies. You just click add, and it will. You can then name it whatever you want. You can then do a source and destination, and this is in the packet itself. Has a source and destination address and source and destination port in the packet of information. So this is going to match what you're trying to say. So if you wanted to match anything from the internet, you would just do a source zone and say internet zone. And say you can do a source address if you like, or just leave it as any. And then you would make sure you would have a destination in mind, or you could have it as any. You could have any zone or anything if you want, or you can select something, say blue team, or a destination address. You can put in your own destination address in here. Application, you can put in any application you want. All the different applications that we just went through. There's tons and tons and tons, literally thousands of them. Or you can do an application group. Again, the service URL category, which is if you're going to match against a service such as a port, TCP, UDP, that type of thing. And then action. You can allow, or you can deny, or you can drop it. You can reset the client, reset the server, or do both. So those are your actions. Basically, it's allow and deny, but you can send packets back to the client or the server saying, hey, something didn't go through, so, or I'm dropping your traffic. And it will let the client computer or the sender know that, hey, it's been blocked. Profile setting, this is where you would set up different profiles for antivirus, vulnerability, spyware, all that type of thing. Or you can do the group, which will do them all, depending on what you've set up inside under the object, the group there. So, and then of course you can log it, either not or both at the session start, session end, and then you can log forward it to a log server if you like. And this is matched by just the rule. So you can do certain rules forward their logs and certain rules don't. Same thing with the schedule. You can have certain rules apply at certain times a day or certain calendar days if you want. Same thing with QoS marking. You can prioritize some rules over others. So it very, very, very granular with different ways you can match things and filter your traffic. So that leads me to the sessions, because I just mentioned sessions. So every packet that runs through here, it's like, for example, when you're getting an IP address or establishing a connection to another computer, it will go through what they call a handshake. It'll send a SYN packet and an ACK packet and a SYN-ACK packet, and when you have those 3 packets, those are all considered a session. So basically everything associated with one type of traffic is going to get recorded as a session. So if you've got say you're gonna watch a Netflix movie, all of the packets that are associated with that movie are then as one session. So it's a way of making the logs a little smaller. So anyway, so this is our the traffic monitoring logs, and these are all the different logs that you have available. But this is the traffic one. This is the big one. Source is 100196. That's my own computer in my office, and it looks like it's going to a destination of one of the computers. This actually happened back in February, as you can see here, and the application was ping, and it was allowed, and it would hit this rule to get allowed. And the reason why the session ended is it just aged out, and this is how many bytes it had in that one session. And so yeah, you can see that I was pinging this address here, which is I think a client computer, just to make sure that I had connectivity to it from my computer. Excuse me. And then it records the date. And then also, if I had this set up to where it would authenticate against an Active Directory or some other user identification server, it would show up here as the user. So this IP address, and then my name, and then destination, and then destination user if it was set up that way. Threats, it probably is not going to have anything in the list here just because it's pretty isolated, and it doesn't get used much. So no threats have been detected yet over it. Same thing with URL filtering. It doesn't get used much, so there's not much to see in the URL filtering. But you can see what category of traffic it was, the URL list, the actual URL that they went to, the zones, the source, user, destination. I mean, it keeps track of everything. And you can see anything wildfire related, data filtering, global protect, IP tag, user ID will show you what it knows about IP to user, and then whether or not it's changed. So it's got timeout, receive time, data source, that type of thing. So it knows all kinds of things about users and IPs and what types. Configuration will tell you different things that happen with the configuration. So any changes that you make to the actual firewall, so in this case it's happened back in February, I made this group and it recorded it in the log as a configuration change. So which is handy if you've got more than one admin working on a firewall, that you can say, okay, we made a change and we made a mistake. Who did that? Oh, that was this guy, you know. So same thing with the system logs. It tells you anything, I think. Yeah, there it goes. Took a minute. That's the one thing about the firewall, is the interface itself is not very fast, but the traffic scanning is where it's really all the processing power is concentrated on. So it's really fast with the scanning, but getting data out of it is sometimes a bit slow and pokey. So anyway, so this is the system log that just shows you what versions were upgraded to the newest database of vulnerabilities and other the hacks basically that it knows about. And then you can also do a packet capture through this as well. If you ever played with Wireshark before on your own computer, you can see traffic running through your own computer. Well, this one, it actually can capture traffic running across it. So anything it sees, you can actually capture the actual traffic, not just the session information. Of course, that does create a very large file on your firewall, and which is not a good thing because the space is fairly limited. So you don't want to do this all the time. So that's why it's off by default. And you only turn it on if you're doing some sort of troubleshooting, or you see something really suspicious. So you then use filter it, and then you turn on the packet capture, and then you can actually capture the whole packets of information that come through. And you can use those for analysis, different types of analysis to troubleshoot, basically. It also has a reporting feature that you can set up that will tell you how many threats it found for the day, or the month, or the year, or how many different URLs it filtered out, or basically anything in the log files. It can be collated into a report for you, which is handy, so that you know, once a day you'll get a report on all the different stuff that happened for the day. Or you could get that report and send it to your boss and say, hey, our firewall is doing great, it's doing this and found these threats, and it's allowing this much traffic, and you know, all that type of thing. So it looks cool for the boss, and the boss can then send that up the chain to the CEOs, and they can say, oh wow, they're doing a great job there over in the IT department. So yeah, that's what the reports are for. Botnet. Oh, botnet is if it actually can detect whether or not you've been attacked by a botnet. It's pretty cool. And then session browser browses all the different sessions at once. So, but that's pretty much my firewall presentation. The high spots. There's a ton and a half for this, and it's a very, very, very high quality firewall, worth every penny they charge for it, because it's all in one piece. Everything's really easy to configure. Even though there's a ton to configure, it's still pretty easy. It's just drag and drop and drop downs, and you know, yeah, you got to know what you're doing, but you know, that's what training's for. That's what Palo Alto's help files are for, and things like that. So any questions? Because we're just about out of time here, and got a few more minutes to answer any questions. Oh, one other thing. After you've made a configuration change, the way that say you made a policy change and you added it to this list of security policies, well, it's not live. Once you've added it, you have to click commit, and then it will commit any changes that you've made. And then if you only want to limit to yourself, you can, or you can commit all the changes, and then you can preview the changes. And see what was modified. So I'm not sure what was modified last time, but so I can just click commit, and it runs a commit for me. I think I added an address or something like that.
Is there any downtime during the commitment?
No downtime. It's all seamless. The only thing, and in fact, you can you click commit and you can click close, and it will commit in the background as you're, and you can continue to work on it or just leave it alone, whatever. But it will do it all in the background. But no downtime. And so you can actually click on the task here and see what it's been doing. And right now it's doing a commit job right here, and you can see the other. We've got downloads. A commit happened back in February. Other downloads. So this is where I was updating the firewall to the latest versions. By the way, other manufacturers of networking equipment like Juniper, they work similar to this, to where you make all the changes you want in the configuration, usually the command line though. You make all the changes to the configuration file, and then you commit it. and it's got its good points and its bad points. For something very complex like a firewall, you generally want a GUI anyway, so the commit system works fine. But personally, for like a switch, I like things to happen immediately after I've clicked it. You know, there's not much to configure on the thing, so there's no reason to have to go through this whole big config file and then click commit and then wait and then wait and then wait and then wait.
I have a question.
Whereas the Cisco ones, that's what I like. The Cisco switches, as soon as you type in a command and press enter, it's live. It's there.
Got a question?
How much of this stuff on like Palo Alto will be on the test, if any?
Everything you just talked about, 100%.
Yep, you're gonna have the Palo Alto certification exam. Sorry.
On final.
Okay.
These concepts we want you to understand. We want you to understand about virtualization. We want you to understand about firewalls, what they do, what their capabilities are. So, and we will do a review for the final.
You'll make sure you post the video then, because I'll need to review this just to make
sure. Oh yeah, definitely. And if you want access to this server, that's the exact one, I can give you access to it. That's not a problem.
Hey Peter, any chance like if we get another server, can we have separate Palo Alto up and running so you can use one for open
Gary, you got all kinds of requests for everything, don't you?
just asking.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Absolutely, that's fine. All right, I'm going to stop my recording.